gang. Going to be doing a couple of quick jobs in this episode, hopefully. Getting some work out the door between the big projects. I've been slammed lately, and with some contemplation I've realized it's probably because I'm too darn nice. 4 times in the last month I've had people scheduled for a repair, and when they show up they bring an extra guitar or 2. It's just one of those things. Maybe it's because I'm like a 12th generation Canadian or something, but I find it hard to decline and send them away when I really should. So in a schedule that's been booked solid for weeks ahead, at this point I've been trying to jam another 8 or 9 hours of work in. Of course, the big jobs always hold a surprise or 2 as well, and they go long, so there's no winning. I might try and get a bit meaner. I'm still working on the Lion and Healy. I'm waiting for some binding of the appropriate color. My antique white is actually too antique, so I might get that up next week, or I might not. I'm going to the Fretboard Journal Fretboard Summit in Chicago next weekend. So, you know, I might try and shoot some shaky handheld footage of that trip. I might not. We'll see. Here we have a sterling Mariposa. It's a Music Man product designed with Oscar Rodriguez Lopez, from probably best known from the Mars Volta, but he's done other projects as well. It's kind of a neat design. The owner purchased this online and it was apparently new in box, but it's got an issue. No sound is coming from one of the pickups. And rather than send it back, he's going to have me try and fix it because shipping and returns can be a big hassle, and he wants this guitar. So let's plug it in, give it a try, and see what happens. Okay, plugged in. Bridge pickup? Fine. There are 2 volume controls on this guitar and nothing else. That seems to function. Middle. Neck. Nothing. Not a thing. So, that's not good. It's an interesting way to mount the switch. It's got a little plate that screws right down into the wood, and there's this little window in the pickguard. And under here, a neat little package. I'll just have a quick look here to see if there's anything grounding out. Oh, I see something already, I think. This little white wire is touching nothing. Question is, where does it go? I imagine it goes to the central lug there where this capacitor is hooked up to this black wire, the other leg of that. So yeah, I think that probably has to go down there somewhere. Broken solder joint. I'll grab it with a pair of tweezers and see if connecting it to that lug does the trick, and it does. I'll heat up the soldering iron. You can suck a little solder off the tip there. You probably don't even need the solder sucker. And when reconnecting something like this, it's always a good idea to add a bit of fresh solder as well. Just helps the parts go together properly. Doesn't need much, but there has to be a little bit of fresh material. Action speaks louder than words. In this case, we've got about 5 1/2/64 on the bass and about 5 on the treble. It's a bit high. The other thing is, it seems like excess relief. We'll measure that. It's about 11 thousandths, which can come down slightly. This has got one of the groovy wheeled spoke adjusters. It feels like a lot of play. Oh, hey. Well, okay. Maybe not. I feel bad about doing that much. I'll try maybe just a little bit more. It feels snugger than I want it to feel. Yeah, that's about all. I've got it down to 7/1000ths relief, which is okay. This product is made in Indonesia, so it's basically the Music Man version of a Squier. And some of the tolerances might be a little bit less than you'd expect from an American-made Music Man. There seems to be quite a lot of room for the strings to come down at the nut. That's what I'm noticing is playing in the lower positions, I seem to be really kind of having to push down before I reach the frets. So let's lower the nut slots a little bit. For nut height, if I'm measuring over the first fret with a feeler gauge here, the string's not pressed down anywhere, I want to see somewhere around 21, 22 thousandths. This is 25. So there's probably, 26 thousandths between the bottom of the string and the top of the first fret, which is like 2.5 strokes of the file. And so I'll do that. I'll lower them. The other thing is, it seems that this low E string is actually a bit of a tight fit in the slot, almost as if it was cut for a 42. I think these are probably 46. So knowing if it was tight, you want to be careful and sneak up on this. This is some really rubbery kind of plastic. Locking tuners on this model. The rest of these I'll do basically by eye. I want to see a little tiny gap between this fret and the string. I also do it by feel. Okay, the action came down a little bit, not quite enough. Okay, so I've got 4/64ths on the bass side, just over 3 on the treble, which is a nice low action for this kind of guitar, I think. Pretty sure he'll be happy with that. Yeah, bridge pickup seems a little bit low. Fretting at the end of the fretboard here, I've got 3/32, 16th. Yeah, it's not too bad. Maybe up a touch on the bass side. Okay, so that's all set up, ready to go. It's brand new. I'll let the customer have the singular joy of peeling the plastic off the pickup covers. Brand new with a maxed out truss rod. It sets up okay, but there's no future adjustment in this guitar. Other than that, pretty cool. Here we have a rather nice Laravee C09 model from 1993. That's 30 years ago. Back when they were making these in Victoria, British Columbia, the good old days. The owner wanted me to lower the action as it was getting pretty high for him. And in my initial inspection, I noticed that there was quite a bit of extra relief in the neck, which isn't uncommon for Laravees, because they've always required these weirdly shaped adjustment hex key wrenches that are sort of like a J or an L with a little dog leg in it. And those are almost never in the case. And without them, it's virtually impossible to tighten or loosen the rod. It's accessed through the neck block. And I guess Sean never wanted to cut a hole into the transverse brace up here like you find on certain other guitars. So they came up with this odd wrench system. You can buy those for about 20 bucks from Laravee. They have a couple of styles though, depending on the year, and it, starts adding up. So if you're just getting into it and you have to be frugal, you might have no money, but maybe you do have access to a blowtorch, so you fashion something like this and reconcile yourself to the fact that you're going to have to loosen the strings every time you want to do an adjustment. Which is not a big deal. So with the adjustment and a little bit off the bass side on the bottom of the saddle, I now have very nice action for a fingerstyle player, but I'm running into something else. I think it's had a partial refret, at least. These little chips here in the ebony beside the fret. I think the top of the bridge has been shaved down a little bit as well, but whoever did it did a pretty conscientious job. I don't hate it. However, the main thing is the top of this saddle is very flat. Now there should be a radius, because of course the fingerboard is radiused. They have to relate to each other. If it's too flat, you can lower the action and it'll be great on the outside E strings. Like you might have 4/64ths on your upper E, but in the center here, these strings are too close to the top of the frets. Might be only 3/64ths in the middle. So naturally you start to get buzz and rattle. It's no good. So unfortunately this saddle is non-functional. I'm going to need to make a new one. We'll pull this guy out. Fun, this top's got a little bit of bear claw figure in it. It's very nice. And I see we have an under saddle pickup of the braided variety. Because I'm making a new saddle, sometimes it's a good idea to check and see what's under there, just in case there are like a bunch of shims or something that we could do without. So the radius on this fretboard is, well, it's probably a compound radius, but I think it's around 16 inches. And this saddle has been shaped to a radius that is flatter than 20. So there's the problem. I've already sanded the bone blank to the appropriate width, and here I'm checking the length of the slot. I'll transfer that to the blank, and we'll cut that off just outside the pencil line. I'll file the ends into a neat radius. With an undersaddle pickup like this, I want the fit to be slightly less snug than without a pickup, because you can't have this thing hanging up on the side walls of the slot. You want all of that energy to go downwards into the pickup. That's close. I think it needs like 3 strokes on some 600 grit paper. I'll sand the radius into the top of the blank with the radius sanding block. I can gauge the height from the previous saddle, adding just a little bit of extra for fine-tuning and adjustment. Okay, I've reduced it to close to the action height I want. I'm using the little bent G-string trick here, which the top of the saddle is currently flat, and that just lifts it above so that I can fool with the intonation, pulling that back and forth until the octaves are pretty sweet. And then I just mark it, and that gives me a point to file to. Okay, I think we're ready to go here. So the action came down about 20% from when it arrived, and no weird buzzing on the center strings. Which, you know, it's amazing how little. We're talking in order of like 5 or 6 thousandths, just over the thickness of a sheet of paper, makes a difference. Those are the tolerances. Anyway, I like this guitar. It's really nice. And here we've got an echo guitar. This is a model 290 from I think the early 60s, 63-ish. Later on they called this one the Barracuda. Typical thin line hollow body electric, made in Italy. The main issue with this is it seems to have taken a fall, landed hard on the bass here. There's a big crack in the side that runs a long way, and the top has come loose too from the sides. Interestingly, the brake didn't travel, it seems, through the tail block area, but there is another crack in the region of the jack. Now these cracks are pretty tight. I do want to get some glue into them, and obviously that loose top plate is a big deal. We need to get that locked down. The other thing is the switch. It's doing something funny. So if I try to move positions, there's a jostling sound inside, and some wires are visibly moving down here in the F-hole. So we need to tell the little man in there to behave. Now the owner knows these crack repairs aren't going to be pretty. There's some delamination of the finish around them too, this sort of ghostly whitish color. And this doesn't feel or behave like standard American nitro lacquer of the time. I don't know what's in this coating. So, you know, we're just going to glue it up, lock these parts together. That's what he wants. I'm starting to take off the strings, and I thought it'd be a good idea just to plug it in and see what happens. And there's really nothing of anything. So now there is. Yeah, so I suspect that this switch is really loose and maybe there's a wire that's pulled off or something, which is going to be fun, but you know, what do we expect from these things? We'll pull off the tail piece here. It might make clamping easier, and I don't really want this thing flopping around on the finish without any string tension on it. Okay, so I thought this finish might have faded over time, but it seems like it's always been this kind of iced tea burst. Okay, that came off, and this seems to be, don't quite know what's going on with that. I hate the idea of taking this whole thing apart, but it might come to that. Get this out of the way. This interesting and vintage piece of plastic. You can see this front pickup here is missing its ring. And also this area seems slightly damaged, not unlike that Hagstrom, which we worked on a couple of weeks back. You know, sudden compressive damage. These pickups look similar to some Hofners I've seen. Okay, that's going to be of no help at all. There is a tiny little route for the wire, but there's no access to where the jack is. So, might as well just put that right back in place. Easier said than done. I've got the soft jaw pliers here, and really I just want to hold it steady. Tighten the nut up a little bit. Okay. Still very stiff. I'm going to put some penetrating lubricant down here and some contact cleaner. Trying to get rid of some of the grunge. Don't know too much about these Echo arch tops. I know the solid bodies have a little bit of a fandom. These frets are quite low. 27 thousandths, 25 thousandths, so like fretless wonder frets. The neck is quite narrow. It's about 1 5/8, but the actual playing surface, because the frets don't extend past this rather wide binding, they are quite narrow. It's less than 1.5 inches at the 0 fret. Polishing, 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 polishing. Fun, 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 fun. It's Saturday though. It echoes down through the decades. Mondo music. Rock and roll, Italian style. Well, this seems to be easier to move around now. It's interesting. This is one of the guitars with a kill switch on the switch, which turns off both pickups. So, it's funny in the selections as well, because turned all the way down you've got both, and then bridge, neck, and then off. So it's not like a Gibson. The middle position does not give you both pickups. All the way down does. The other complication, and probably the reason we were having such issues, is this switch. Let me get you around here. You can see this switch has a flat on one side, which you would expect would mate up nicely with something on the inside of the knob, but unfortunately this is round. So when these go together, there's nothing to prevent this from sort of just rotating. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe there was a second part that broke off, like maybe it was split, like a standard pot or something. But it doesn't function reliably. I'm just wondering, like, to fix this, maybe put a little bit of epoxy putty in here, a little plastic wrap over this, and cast the part in place so that we'll have a recess that matches that, and it won't be able to spin. Because good luck trying to find one of these things at this stage. Needle in a haystack. You know, if you fold it over, that's 2, that's 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 500 and, well, I've lost count. Anyway, we're somewhere up around 1,000,000 folds. So I think we're probably good and mixed. So I'm going to put this on the back half. Turn that all the way forward. Get that aligned. Squeeze it down. Let that sit for about 5 minutes. And it should be hard enough for me to remove the plastic. That seems to have worked. Just a little bit in there I'd like to trim off, make it a little bit neater. The stuff is like leather hard consistency right now. Let it go for another half hour or so, it'll be nice and hard. Okay, all set up. At the risk of offending my Italian friend Nick, I know he has a passion for echoes, this doesn't feel like an Italian guitar. This feels just like a Harmony Rocket, to the point where I wonder if they got their hands on one and took it apart and sort of re-engineered it. But yeah, no, it is. It's cool for what it is. I wish it had different frets, but that's me.